When they said we're going to shoot it upside down, it made perfect sense because the model was the dumb object in the scenario. By hanging them off from the ceiling, we could put all the lights on the floor, we can adjust all the lights all we needed. All the motion control system would be sitting on the floor where we needed it. Out of all the photography on the Titanic, those shots are, for me, the most difficult. And I think we even fooled Jim on a couple of those shots.
In order to get specifically scripted scenes that we couldn't get at the real wreck, we built a set in a tank in Escondido, California.
Well, this is the underwater set of the Titanic as it exists today. So we're trying to recreate the wreck. The hallway you're looking at is the first class hallway that would lead to the first class suites and first class rooms. The majority of the research came from Jim Cameron, who was actually on the wreck. So we have his video from when he was actually on the wreck. We've taken that combined with the photographs we have of the actual ship. The first and most important concern is that it's going into a tank so it can't float. Each of these walls weighs about a half a ton.
We had to create it to look like it had been underwater for many, many years. So we came up with all sorts of interesting ways of burning and then shellacking and then burning again to try and give it that aged look, and the sand, pushing the sand into it as it's drying and shellacking it again to make it look like it had been underwater for quite a while.
When I found out that Kate Winslet was cast, I said to Jim or whoever it was, I would like to meet her. And they said, why? I said, well, I want to see her body gestures, her voice level, because I'm playing her. She's not playing me. So we killed a bottle of champagne and we talked, and it was a lovely afternoon. Let's celebrate.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I thought it was remarkable. I mean, she is a remarkable woman. She's extraordinary, and the stories she has, you know, about partying with the Marx Brothers, and I mean, she's just absolutely incredible.
I know it's hard for you to believe that, but it really and truly is not my hair. The breast is mine, the stomach is mine, the hips are mine.
Good, and I hope it's still all yours. I loved the time that I spent with her. I hope I'm like her when I'm that age.
The reason that we put in this little narrative bit of business where we explain the sinking of the Titanic is so that we wouldn't have to explain it as it was actually happening. And even though the death convulsions of the Titanic were very technical, Jim condensed it down so when it was happening, you'd know exactly what was happening with the sinking of the ship, the breaking up, the stern turning perpendicular, and then subsequently sinking underneath Jack and Rose.
I just couldn't think of how you could explain to people what was going on below the water if you didn't already know. I mean, it is pretty cheeky that you're going to show everybody the end of the movie. Not only are people standing in line outside the movie theater saying, why am I standing in this line? I know what happens. But once they're watching the movie, you're going to show them the ending. But the sinking simulation animation, I think, was critical to an understanding of what's going on in those last few minutes.
The lure of the Titanic, especially underwater the way it is now, there's something about it that makes you want it to be the way it used to be. And that became sort of, as we talked about it with Jim, the backbone of the film, because that's part of this film, is that you see it as a wreck and then it essentially comes back to life. The transitions going from the way it used to be to the way it is, or going from the way it is to what it is now, those things can only be done with the total control of having all the elements at your disposal, so you could pick and choose the camera move for drama's sake, not because you have a limitation. So if you need that control, you need a realistic version of what the wreck is. Well, you need a pristine ship. You need to be able to light both of them and then cross-light both of them as you go through one transition to another. And then, of course, you need computer-generated water, which has never been done. We need computer-generated people. So all of a sudden, you need to create all this technology just to recreate the sensation you have by looking at Jim's footage underwater.
We made the decision to only build one side of the ship towards the ocean side of the tank into the prevailing winds, leaving the rest of the tank to build Southampton Dock. And in doing so, we ended up building the starboard side of the ship. It forced us to locate Southampton Dock on that side to shoot the whole sequence, but in fact, in history, it was on the port side.
This is this scene only in reverse. There's the passenger gantry there, and just to everything.
Let's see, if I have a scene that takes place on the port side, but I only have the starboard hull, then I have to shoot the scene on the starboard side and then turn the film around mirror image later. So that would be starboard flop for port. It gave us a little bit of a brain teaser trying to figure out exactly how to cheat these things so that they would look right. Where were you standing again? Who was on your right? Okay, well if they were on your right, they're going to be on your left. And you were holding hands with your right hand, so, and turn your hat around, and it was a nightmare.
This flopping thing, I just haven't been able to get my head around at all. You know, one minute my parting's on this side, the next minute, no, we're flopped, it's on that side. And it just started to make me laugh when I'd see men with white star line written across their hats just backwards. I couldn't quite get my head around it, so I just sort of gave up.
It's just not something you want to do. But you know, we saved millions by not building that other side of the ship.
We brought in Bob and Denny Skotek to add the ship and dock outside of our green screen pub set, and they came up with a pretty economical and effective solution.
There was a little bit of forced perspective. We created the shot the way we wanted to look on paper and then proceeded to build everything to fit that look. We felt the best way we could do that was to assemble a combination of miniature elements and painted elements and then enhance it all by adding people in digitally.
The ship was a photographic cutout, and everything in foreground from that was a miniature in some form or another to the scale that fit to our train. That was sort of like guiding us in which direction that we should go in. In addition to that, of course, the backdrop, the very backdrop of the sky was painted, and I think we did a pretty good job of matching to the full-size set pieces.
So we had our big set, but now we had to make the ship sail, and that's where Digital Domain came in. They created and composited literally hundreds of elements into the departure sequence, from digital birds, computer-generated water and CG smoke, to background paintings of the pier and the sky. We then added digital people to their 40-foot model ship. And scores of waving extras were shot against green screen in parking lots and placed in the foreground of the shots. All of these effect shots had to blend perfectly with our live-action shots of the set to sell the illusion that the great ship was on its way.
The real Titanic was a collection of people from all walks of life brought together for one fantastic experience, and that's really what happened with the extras.
It was such a great assortment of people. You had, Irish people, Scottish people, English people, Norwegian, Swedish, and it was such a nice melting pot.
These weren't people who were professional actors necessarily, or even professional extras. And they really were people who come from all walks of life and were brought together. And there was sort of this comparison in my mind between the people who were on the movie set as extras, as passengers, and the people who were on the Titanic.
They worked together for so long by the end of the film. They had such great heart. They loved coming to work every day. They became like this kind of strange family.
What a great week. Thank you very much. You're all fantastic.
Third class and first class in 1912, they were very segregated, and in some ways you did know your place. The average American made $500 a year. If you were to sail in the Titanic in third class, it cost you about $33 for a bunk, and you would share a room. The most expensive stateroom was well over $4,000. So really, a suite on the Titanic would have cost you 8 times the American average income.
Part of the story would be about class distinction, so we had to show the luxury and the spectacle and the beauty of it.
And Jim even went to the length of the stateroom that he had Rose stay in. It was unknown who had stayed in that room. So it wasn't contradicting some historical figure who might have perished.
J.P. Morgan was supposed to be, had booked the room and then decided not to sail at the last minute. And it was assumed that Bruce Ismay had moved into it, but that wasn't documented. So as far as we know, it was empty or was available for our characters.
The engine room sequence was very involved. Today, nobody thinks twice about, shooting against a green screen and having it all, digitally added later. But at that time, it was difficult to do digital stuff, so a lot of it was done with models. And we would do motion control matching and a bunch of complicated things. We did some research, and there was this Liberty ship, the Jeremiah O'Brien, which is an old World War II vessel that had triple expansion reciprocating engines. Basically like a 1/3 scale version of the Titanic's engines. So we had some model makers to build 1/3 scale lights and catwalks. And then we treated it as basically a model shoot We went into this Liberty ship, we lit it with miniature light bulbs, and we had catwalks, and then we photographed at a slightly faster film rate to sort of give it a little bit more mass. One of the things I learned from Jim is the key is never do the same trick twice. Just when you think, they're doing it with motion control and a background, you change it and now it's a real engine room, with the Jeremiah O'Brien with its 1/3 scale engines moving around. Then you cut to another shot and, it's a green screen foreground with a background of the model. If you always mix the techniques up, you're bound for a much better success than relying on one technique for the entire film.
We're doing essentially an advertisement for the Titanic. Look how great it is to be in a Titanic. And how do you film a commercial like that now without actually doing it? The audience now is used to seeing these great sweeping helicopter shots as the grandeur of being out on the water. And we photographed the Lane Victory, which is a 1945 ship, and imitated those shots. And then we used that as the basis to animate our motion control camera doing exactly the same thing. It became our animatic of sorts. You've seen a ship on the water before, and this is what it feels like. So hopefully it would make it more realistic. That was the idea of the people. I'm going to shoot vignettes of people that are doing real life things. So hopefully, again, the sum total of what you're seeing, even in the periphery, is something that is real life. And hopefully, at the end of the day, your sum total of what you've seen is something that feels correct and feels real as opposed to completely artificial. The first time we came up with the whole motion capture idea, I learned very quickly that even though you could capture the way a human moves, it's really the way they move that makes you believe that they're dramatically in that scene. So you have to direct them. It's like, no, you can't just walk. You have to walk somewhere. You have to walk, you have to do something. You're creating a moment in time. Context makes these little vignettes come to life. We started to populate the ship with these people. And once they moved, you got the essence of that personality. It's not generic people. And all of a sudden, you sort of put these souls of these people that you transplanted through this process onto the deck of a ship. Now everybody does this sort of thing, so it's no longer as fascinating as it was. But at that moment that you crossed that bridge and you knew that, boy, anything is now possible, this is now going to change the face of doing this kind of work. It was pretty thrilling, I have to say.
We called this the $1 million shot, not only because it nearly cost that much, but because for Jim, it really sold the reality and the beauty of Titanic. We were going for a full-on helicopter-type beauty shot to cap the scene, because it was very important to the story that we see the ship in broad daylight in all its glory.
If you didn't appreciate the ship, you couldn't appreciate the sinking. So you had to appreciate it in the terms, in the subjective terms, that people felt about it before they knew they were on the Titanic. It both celebrates the ship and it celebrates Jack's character at the same time, which is what I really love about that scene. It just makes it seem like the idea that you're going to die, that disaster and doom are coming, are so far away and so impossible to conceive. And if you don't start from that place, you'll never understand what it was like to be on that ship.
So the question was, how do we do it? Where do we start? We put Danny and Leo on a turntable at Digital Domain. And the turntable and a slight camera move exaggerated the move. So when we're coming off of them, that was all done against green screen, and they were then composited onto the model of the ship. And as we pull back to a certain point where we couldn't move the camera anymore, they transitioned from live people against a green screen into CG, computer-generated characters. We then had to add all of the other elements to the shot. Computer-generated water, digital smoke, digital birds, a digital flag flapping in the wind at the stern, motion captured digital people to populate the ship, and wake elements shot off of real ships manipulated digitally were all combined with our large-scale miniature shot on a stage. Pulling the shot off took pretty much every visual effect trick in the book, and a few we had to develop ourselves. A lot of these methods are now commonplace in the effects industry. It really was a key moment in the film, both in terms of exuberance of the voyage and the proof of how all the different effects techniques can come together to convey the emotion and tell the story.
My favorite set would have to be the ship set, stage one. It was virtually the whole ship. The deck heights were accurate. The width of the ship was made accurate.
This thing was enormous. I mean, this wasn't some little set. This was this massive 80-story building on its side.
While we built a tremendous amount of the ship, we did not build the whole ship. We were able to eliminate sections of the ship by angling back the camera in a different direction.
It was expensive to build the whole thing. So one of the things we had to do was we had to reduce the length of the ship. So what we actually did was we took 3 slices of 20 foot out of the ship in 3 different places and just shunted all together.
There is never a shot of the entire thing from end to end complete all at once. And the reason is because it never was.
The scene in which Kate was supposed to throw herself off the stern of the ship became the cover set. And it just became a major pain in the neck to recreate this scene over and over and over again whenever the weather got bad.
Don't do it.
Stay back. Don't come any closer. Sorry.
Come on. Give me your hand. I'll pull you back in.
No. Stay where you are. I mean it. I'll let go.
I could just say there, well, you would have done it already.
See, the whole idea is to engage her without spooking her. Play like it's not even about her. It's like
good swim.
You have to see what he's doing, Kate.
Yeah, do that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
I like to play this sort of danger of just being like, well, all right, you know, whatever.
Right. It's like walking up to a horse. You have to do it slow.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Also during that scene, Jim wanted to employ several methods shooting it so that he could from one angle shoot down into green screen, and from another angle he might use a painted backdrop. And then from another angle he'd just shoot against black. So this scene, which in the film takes place over a few minutes, was shot over several months.
Here's an example of how we used a 20-foot study model of Titanic and a miniature video camera out on our potential studio location in Mexico to determine how much of the ship we needed to build and where visual effects would come into play. In this case, we had cars and trucks down below, hills of Mexico in the background, and no ship hull. So we turned to visual effects and asked them to digitally add the ship, remove the cars down below, get rid of the hills in the background, and create a realistic looking shot.
In October of 1995, I had my first meeting with Jim. Well, among the first questions was him asking if there was, say, a clothing store on board, as a lot of ships do today. The question was, of course, how do we get Leo into a tuxedo? And I actually came up with the idea that maybe you just sort of have Molly Brown take him under her wing.
I was right. You and my son are just about the same size.
Pretty close.
She had a son about that age, and you could just say that she was bringing him a tuxedo, that she'd bought it in Europe and was bringing it home for him. And then he put that in the script.
I was able to give him the magic coat that got him in the dining room so that he could be with her.
You shine up like a new penny.
God, very nice.
The grand staircase. We're trying to use real oak, so pretty much we're actually building this as they built it on the Titanic. We're not building it as a film set, we're building it as a real staircase that can actually take quite a bit of damage with water and things like that. So if you come here, there's this wonderful dome that is over the top of the grand staircase. It's 24 foot in diameter, and it's all made out of glass, and it's a lovely piece. But unfortunately, we're going to smash it all.
We put it up, and we were finishing painting, and we were getting pretty near the end, and Ken Marshall turned up, and I think he almost burst into tears.
After 30 years of studying the ship so intently and painting the ship so many times, 100 times, see this thing in 3 dimensions and be standing here, I am absolutely speechless.
I don't know if people realize that we had made it more grand than it really was.
People today are just bigger, and 2 people could hardly pass abreast of each other on either side of this center banister.
So we added about 18 inches either side, and it just eased it out, and it did look great.
This is an extraordinary dress. It was actually part of an entire collection that belonged to one woman.
We made a very concerted effort to find as many authentic pieces as we could, because when people go to do a period film, that they're starting from the ground up, you're starting with the corsets and the underwear and the garters and the stockings, and it's a lot of pieces. It's a tremendous accoutrement of accessories. Actors tend to really like that. As they dress themselves, they realize what it felt like to be that person back then.
There's nothing that's been left to chance. Even extras who are in the background that you probably will never see are dressed to the nines. Every single woman has a corset on. Everybody is dressed exactly the way they would have been if they were that character.
Part of the luxury of being in a film like this is that you basically just have to put on the clothes and walk on the set and you're there.
The dining saloon is perhaps the most phenomenal interior set. The fact that that was reproduced full width of the room. Oh, you walked in there and you just had the sense you were on the real ship.
This is actually the dining room. This is actually going to go on our tilting platform. We're going to see this in two different situations. The first one is everyone's dolled up very, very nicely in their first class attire. They come down, they have a meal. But then later on, we're actually going to have to tilt this thing and drop it 30 feet into a tank of freezing cold seawater.
Every prop had to be made. Cutlery had to be found of the right design, glassware, the tableware, everything. The carpet in the dining room all came from the original manufacturer, BMK Stoddart. They still had the old designs, and you know, it was all specially woven for us.
You have all these wonderful heads over here, all these fantastic details we made out of plaster. It's also accented with some wonderful stained glass windows, which produce a really, really nice set. Lovely boat. Shame it went down.
Be Mark. The thing about the dinner scene and even the lunch scene, they're incredibly tedious to do. You just have to do them over and over again, and they've got to cover every actor, and so if there are 10 people at the table.
I got the air in my lungs and a few blank sheets of paper. Got air in my lungs and a couple blank sheets of paper. Got air in my lungs, a couple blank pieces of paper. Got lungs in my air. What was my line?
Air in your lungs.
Got air in my lungs, a couple blank pieces of paper.
What's really great about this group is that there are a lot of very silly people, and we have a lot of laughs, and we just try to keep laughing.
Wrote a little song about it. It goes like this.
To make it count.
Cut.
Them surrounded by people dancing fast. Some of the dancers have to come on the camera side of them, which means that when you pull her out, Leo, you have to pull her out to here, okay, to give room for them to go by.
My favourite scene was dancing in steerage. I just had a blast. It wasn't about water. It wasn't about anything else that had anything to do with the film. It was just fun and silly. And I got to be relaxed much more. I didn't have to look so pristine the whole time. I didn't have people fiddling with me and keeping the makeup perfect and, keeping the wardrobe perfect. And also it was, watching Leo dance, I would happily pay good money to do again. It was very funny.
We got him, we broke him. We finally broke him. Don't give next door.
There's something about putting the corset on and getting into the period clothes that I feel that it does all the work for me. And it gives me a sense of what the women back in the early 1900s had to deal with, because it's impossible to take a deep breath. Have a lungful. Oh, hello. There's something about the restriction that is very appropriate.
It was true at that time that women could not dress themselves or undress themselves. They couldn't even take their own hair down without help. I mean, it was an hour process getting dressed for dinner with the help of one or more maidservants. I mean, it was just crazy, the stuff that they did.
The character of Rose was born into this sort of very claustrophobic, high-class situation with the wealth and the expectations and the limitations on what a young woman could possibly hope to do with her life. She was basically a chattel to be traded for the benefit of the family.
And so they're these creatures of porcelain beauty, but they're not in control of their own lives.
It's so unfair. Through Jack's inspiration, she was able to break free of that and kind of become a model of the 20th century woman.
Hi Jim, some ideas for scene 93, the tea scene. I'm going to play the mother,
and this is Ellie. Just to remind you that everything the mother does should really be very small. All the corrections that she gives the child should just be done, you know, in a minute way. It doesn't need to be huge gestures. She could remind her to put her napkin on her knee. Right. How about fidgeting is a good one. With the spoon in the teacup. Give it a little tap. Right. Fidget, fidget. Thank you. I think a good one is a slice of cake. How to eat cake. And I think the best type of cake to have will be one that's sliced down like this, like a sponge cake, because it's much easier for you to cut with a fork, which you would do. So, like any normal child, she could go to pick it up with 2 hands. Like you do that, Ellie. And the mother can remind her, use your fork. And she would slice it and eat it daintily. And that's it.
The boiler room was a fun set. This was again using a little bit of the old movie magic. Obviously there's so many boilers and the actual Titanic boiler room went on forever. We only built 2.5 boilers and then stuck a mirror on the end. So it looked like the boilers just continued on and on and on. So you were able to look into the mirror and it looked as if the boilers repeated all the way down through the ship. It was a fun bit of movie magic.
Jim's thing to me, he wanted Dante's Inferno. And I think we really got it because it was hot and sweaty down there, and I think the stokers had this kind of great patina and sweat on them, and suddenly all the coal dust started to settle, and you know, you had the real look, and it was great.
The models that contained the flooding were shot outdoors because there was a lot of water involved. We had a rig built where it was like a ball with like a fire hose nozzle hooked up to it. And that was pulled through the hole. I think we hooked it up to somebody's car or something like that to pull that thing. When that shot went off, it looked so real. When we saw it in dailies, we were just amazed the way everything blew in there, and that was a lot of fun.
To create the interaction between our main characters and the iceberg, we dumped a load of ice down a chute on the deck of our big set using a motion control camera and a big piece of green screen behind the set. We then shot our miniature iceberg with the same camera move on a motion control stage with interactive lighting from the ship's windows. We then created digital falling ice pieces to bridge the full scale and miniature elements and composited them together into the final shot. For a subsequent shot of the iceberg moving alongside the ship, we started with a live-action plate shot on our big set, and then added our iceberg model, augmented with lighting effects coming from the ship's portholes, real ocean water and foam elements for the wakes, and various splash elements to create the necessary water interaction.
The boiler room was just incredible. You couldn't find a bad angle to shoot the set at. But it wasn't designed very well for the flooding sequence because they had no capacity to relieve the water once it poured in. So we just shot this thing as the events were happening, and each take we did, it got more and more deep.
Another set where it was decided that it was going to be too expensive, vastly too expensive to build it, was the first class lounge.
We knew that we also needed a miniature where we could actually show that whole room being submerged underwater. If we eliminated building the set and shot against a green screen, we could put those performers into the model as if they were actually in the room.
At quarter scale, you can get a lot of realism. It basically relied on our miniature to pick up all the slack. I was really happy that they felt that our miniature was good enough to be used as those kind of backgrounds.
During the shooting of the third class area, when walking through all the corridors and moving everything around, you'd almost get lost.
You know, everyone was going for craft services and they were gone for 2 hours because nobody knew where they were, and they're all walking around with sweets in their hands, you know. the set definitely did that. Even though it was huge, and it was a huge, you know, ship, still in the steerage it was small and compact. It was really claustrophobic.
Small rods. Get 2 tubes. Small rods.
You can't go up there. You can't do this.
And you'd almost believe that if you were in that situation as the water was flooding, it must have been a horrible, horrible place to be. The lights would have gone out. It would have been dark. You would have been lost. You wouldn't have known where you were. A terrible, terrible situation to be in for anybody. Even when we're shooting it and the lights went out, it was scary. Imagine the actual real thing happening. Not very nice.
This is the ending dress for the big chase around the boat, the chiffon ombre. The water dress, as we called it, was probably the biggest design challenge in the movie. The dress had a tremendous amount of layers to it, and it was silk chiffon that had been ombre dyed, which meaning it changed colors. It was a very, very complicated dress to make, and I think we probably ended up making about 24 or so of them.
Yeah, go ahead, Kate, lift it up. The right shoes Do you like pink bloomers?
I think it worked out really well. I was quite pleased also with the way that it functioned when it was dry. And there's that wonderful slow motion shot from behind, and you see Kate in the dresses kind of beautifully blowing in the wind. We knew that the dress had to be able to be shown in the water and still look good.
Don't worry, Jack. You're not going to drown. I've come to save your life apart.
The logistics of her getting around the ship and being underwater and swimming, and I'm sure Kate hated that thing after wearing it for months and months.
Oh, yeah. Mighty cold.
That water was so cold. I think it was about 60 degrees, and everybody else was in wetsuits or dry suits or something, but I can't wear anything underneath that costume because by design, Jim has always wanted it to be as though I'm naked when it's wet against my legs. So, of course, you know, there's no room for such joys.
Don't say a word.
It wasn't just building the set. It was building all the stuff to shoot and light the set that was adding a layer to it that we hadn't really anticipated. That all the normal Hollywood lighting tools, photography tools, went out the window.
Right. The real issue is going to be having this be variable height.
So I thought, well, what about a crane? The big construction crane with a big boom, a big jib crane on a mobile transporter, essentially. So we can move the crane up and down the full length of the set.
What happened very early on in the shooting of the film was that the tower, which was basically a large construction train on a track, was liberated by Jim when he realized that he could hang a camera from under the tower and basically get pseudo-helicopter shots of the entire ship. Really became a really beautiful camera platform. We definitely got shots that we never would have been able to get otherwise.
What we're seeing here are boats 9, 11, 13, and 15 leaving in pretty quick succession. And for a lot of the steerage passengers, this is their last chance to get off, because after this they're going to have to head way down to the bow to find a boat that hasn't left yet, maybe not even get there in time. And so people are just scrambling into the boats and getting away, and these boats are pretty much the most...
As they build a tank, it'll create lift on the set, and they can pick the set up with these hydraulic cables and raise it right up till it's flush with the top of the tank. And then with all that water volume underneath it, they can then start to lower one end and just sink the whole thing into the water. God. So that's the theory. Now, no one's ever done this before. They keep telling me it's going to work,
is it like a
but
one-shot deal? Or?
No, it can't be, because we have so much coverage to do in here.
Lower the set, Scotty. Okay, we're lowering the set, Josh. We're lowering the set.
Alright. So put it back to the starting level.
Reset, please.
And lower.
Set, Steve. Lower the set. Lower the set.
A lot of the water stuff has been really rough just because I'm really temperature sensitive. I gotta get heated up.
Oh shit! This is cold!
To act when you're freezing is hard to concentrate.
Please! Please help us! Please! Hurry! Master, come on! I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Wait! No! Don't leave! Get more help! God!
You have to lunge up like this to grab that light, and that puts you sort of up out of the water. That'll look fine.
We built the first-class smoking room set with all the great wood paneling, beautiful fireplace, and the painting above for the scenes in the film where Cal socialized with the other first-class passengers. Since the set was built primarily for the early pre-collision scenes, we built it level on the stage. The irony is that in order to make it look tilted for the later scenes with Victor Garber, we had to tilt the camera and then have the actors lean to one side. We also made props like wine glasses and shot glasses with the correct tilt built into a solidified gel. We then used string to pull the glasses off the mantelpiece, which coupled with the tilt of the camera, completed the illusion. To show the ship actually sinking, we had to adjust the ship to a 6-degree angle. We then disconnect the front 180 feet of the ship and put it on hydraulic cables that will raise and lower it. And you will actually see the front section of the ship on camera go underwater as the water pours up on actors.
I think that people need to remember that a lot of what you see in this movie is real people running along a really huge set. Though visual effects might have added a component into the set, basically it's 90% the real deal. Yes, this was back in 96 and 97 when we still did things with real people and real sets.
That's a cut.
We designed a series of visual effect shots to take advantage of the big ship set in the later stages of the sinking. By filming a lock-off shot of the tilted main set, which didn't move, and a second shot of the sinking set, we could have ILM digitally combine them into one shot, creating the illusion that the entire ship was sinking while still seeing all of our actors and extras running around on deck without having to use a model or digital people. Since our big set was only tilted at one angle, 6 degrees, we tilted the camera to make it look as if the ship was at a steeper angle. Then, digitally added a new waterline and horizon to disguise the extra camera tilt. We had a full-scale 40-foot truck tank painted up like a funnel that we dropped on the set to create a huge wave to swamp our lifeboats. But we also needed some wider shots with a miniature funnel falling behind and even on some of our characters.
The funnel that was used was 14-foot tall, quarter scale, and the plate that we got was a full down view minus the funnel, in which there was a long, thin splash in the water that was accomplished by a line of primer cord that was detonated in the water. So we had to retrofit our cable to hit that exact spot.
Fabrizio is the one that gets nailed by the smokestack. And there's a whip pan away from him towards this smokestack, and the live action, there's nothing there, it's just black. The problem with the model was the weight. It was up in many hundreds of pounds. We solved some of the weight problem because of the fact that we weren't using any metal other than the framework. Parts that would come close to the camera were done with show card, basically cardboard that was painted. And oddly enough, the texture of the show card, when it was painted, had the same exact feel
as the metal would have. There was a little bit of nervousness the first time we did it because we really didn't know how far it was going to fall, how hard it was going to hit.
Everybody okay?
We did it several times, and when we did get it, this felt really good because it was all in camera. There was nothing else that needed to be added other than the first part of the shot. Digitally, now what's really good is being able to take these two separate pieces of film and put them together and make them seamless.
We're talking about, Charlie, 60-degree water? 60-degree. 60-degree water. Long-term exposure, again, we have to watch out for the hypothermia.
I don't think you're going to have to tell anybody to get out of the water, John.
I'll be forcing you out of the water.
Water's going to come up, follow that post up.
Yeah. A little short one. Roll cameras. And action!
To a mark that I give you, and dome. Got it. All right? Sure. And let's say the dome cue 3 times. Okay. So they get it absolutely.
Action!
The hallway was a lot of fun. I think our mall was probably about 20 or 30 feet long. Even to this day, when I show people pictures, they think it's a real hallway. And I said, no, it's only quarter scale. That was really a challenge because it's quite long, and we had to create all these wall panels out of balsa wood and fix them so that they would break realistically. We had some very large drop tanks created so we could drop water and flood it into these things. The camera zipping through there, it was just amazing how fast that camera went through that set. And I was very leery about pulling the camera that quick.
Speed!
DD did this great miniature shot, but Jim didn't think it was quite working when he first saw it until he rotated the shot in editing so that it was tilted, and that made all the difference.
For the jumps, when we had up to 40 people jumping off in one single shot, what everyone thinks is, oh, we had this ship and there was all this water and it was deep water. Actually, there was only a small area that people could actually jump. For most of the tank is only 3 foot deep. And we had a trough area that went out 20 feet from the side of the ship.
And background and action!
We had either dummies floating in the water with their life jackets on, or we had deck chairs made of rubber, so people knew where they could jump. It was very important that when someone jumped, that wasn't the end of the shot. They needed to sort of swim to safety, so the next person could jump and there was no risk of anyone landing on top of anyone else.
We've got second class.
Let's hear it for the stunt team, folks. Let's hear it for
We're currently on the poop deck of the Titanic, and it's a section that's been made that can actually lift to 90 degrees. And so what we've got, 150 extras and 80 to 90 stunt people that we're just rehearsing on this section, just so we can get it to look very realistic. The idea is to create the illusion of danger, but having it safe.
There was a lot of safety parameters that went into it. They all had to be cabled, obviously. I had to make sure that everyone was wearing protective pads.
The worst thing that can happen here is that people are going to land on top of each other, so we've all got to be prepared and know exactly where everyone's intending to go before we start.
We put human-shaped dummies that were completely foam around certain objects that couldn't be made of rubber. Some of the stunt performers would carry these dummies down with them. We made a lot of things in the end out of rubber, or coated things in rubber or foam, so that people could actually hit things and bounce off. We did most of the tumbling down the deck at 25 degrees. That's where the stunt performers could still control to a degree where they went, and they wouldn't get really hard impact.
The section that we were shooting over was over 400 feet long, and we basically had to get people from one end to the other end and make it look as though they were sliding very fast. And the ship was only at 6 degrees. We had to make it look as though people were at a 45-degree angle and sliding down the deck. And we had people on cables, weighted cables, and we'd made these very, very small like sleds or sledges with very small casters on. Once the cable pulled you, and it would pull you very, very fast, it would release. We'd had a release mechanism built into it. But then you could actually spin 360 degrees. It actually worked very well.
Very early on in the prep of Titanic, I got together with Rob Legato, the visual effects supervisor, and we were going through sequences where it was impossible for stunt performers to actually do these things without seriously getting hurt.
When it was pitched up in the air like it was there, it's 300 feet in the air. A stuntman can't fall that far into water and not break his leg, and that became part of our mission, is to do these digital stunts, which are now very common, but back then were not very common.
We did lots of tests with Rob, like we had people fall off 40-foot or 60-foot rostrums into airbags.
We shot with 2 cameras and basically did our version of motion capture, which we called it roto capture.
He would then test it to see if he could use it for some digital stunt people falling down the set. At the end of shooting, we put on these black, sort of like skin-tight suits with all these balls, and we did things like fall off 20-foot sections, hit rubber, mats, bounce, twist, somersault, and we were those CG guys, so to speak. But when we were doing the falls on the poop deck, which we only had 100-foot sections, some of those shots you're seeing a 200-foot section.
At some point, the connection with the rest of the ship, we would have to do sort of a digital set extension and a digital stunt extension for that.
So the falls would all start for real, and then CG guy would take over, because we would actually come to the end of our fall or the end of our cable. I think the combination of the two worked out extremely well.
As early as late 1995, nearly a year before we shot the scenes, Jim already had a very clear picture in his mind of exactly how to show the splitting and sinking of the ship, shot by shot. We used models and storyboards and all sorts of really low-tech tricks shot with a miniature video camera to build complete video sequences called Videomatics. With the Videomatics, we could show the visual effects companies exactly how we wanted the sequence to play. All they had to do was to look beyond the handheld shaky camera work and funky shots to see the grand and emotional sequence Jim had in his head and was ultimately able to put on film.
What we're doing, we're sinking the damn ship. And right now there's a brake area, it's been pre-scored, and there's lead plating over on the side. And what we're featuring right now in this particular angle is the actual rip, where it actually separates and opens up the side of the ship. So this is probably going to end up being about like 1 second of screen time. But
Action!
Cut!
Cut!
We're checking now, see if it looks good.
We're holding our breath.
Oh, we look great. D camera looks great. Let's see D camera. That's great.
Oh, yeah. You can replay that just floating our photo.
Okay, let's do it again. Put it back together again as best you can. No explosions, and just let it rip.
For the one sequence where the poop section went up to 90 degrees, we tried to do as much with the actors as humanly possible, and, you know, again, safety allowing. But I've got to say, you know, both Kate and Leo were excellent. They weren't scared of heights. We had them 80 feet in the air, and they were cabled, obviously, but it's a long way down.
What's happening, Jack?
I don't know.
For the stunts, we had small platforms that would bolt into the floor. We used machines called fan descenders, which are a big cylindrical drum shaped like a cone, so that when people dropped, they would start fast and then they would decelerate so they could actually land on their feet on the ground. But we had 10 descenders working, so we could drop people the whole 100 feet, and on the way they would hit someone else, who would then fall, hit someone else, and they would fall onto the platforms, whereas our key people on the decelerators would fall the whole 100 feet to the ground below.
We designed some really challenging and memorable shots to sell the height of the ocean liner standing on its end, its stern hundreds of feet in the air. Everybody on the show called this signature tilting shot the toilet paper shot. Why? Because we used a roll of toilet paper on the set to give the cameraman a reference of where a falling digital stuntman would be added later. We then turned the footage over to digital domain to track and add the rest of the elements to the shot.
I'm Judith Crowe and I'm one of the supervisors on Titanic, and this shot here you're seeing the result of a three-dimensional track of the plate so that we can work out the camera move and pass that to other animators to put in stars and ocean and a set extension to extend the ship further into the image. And there's actually a toilet roll dropping through shot which will be replaced by a CG falling body, and a very dramatic shot tilting all the way down from the tip of the stern of the ship all the way down to the ocean.
The final moments of the sinking were achieved through a combination of both old-school visual effects methods and new digital techniques that were groundbreaking at the time. We built a quarter-scale miniature of the stern and poop deck, then shot it with a high-speed camera as it was lowered into a tank. This gave us our main background with the necessary water interaction. We then added digital extras reacting to the rising ocean with mats for when they would disappear beneath the churning water. We also added digital mist elements to blend the digital extras into the miniature shot. Finally, we shot a green screen element of our actors on a full-scale section of the railing and composited it all together and even added a digital camera shake. We shot Kate and Leo and various stunt extras in front of an underwater green screen, which was set up in a small tank in Rosarito at the very end of production. We then combined these elements with a miniature ship element, as well as various bubble passes, both real and computer generated. The idea of putting the stern of the ship in the background of the shot came late in the editing process, but really helped sell the scale of the event. Due to delays in building the outdoor set, we ended up shooting the ending scenes of the movie with Jack and Rose in the water very early in the schedule in a 4-foot-deep indoor tank with an artificial horizon.
Once you get in there, we'll try some stuff, you'll start to get comfortable with it, then we can become a little more animated. The other thing is, conserve your energy, don't go crazy on the first two takes.
Background! Fight for your life!
The performers were forced to crouch down to create an illusion that the tank was deeper than the 4 feet that it actually was.
4, 3, 2, 1, action!
Scary.
We added a whole lot of breath signature visual effects shots because we were unable to get the breath signatures on set that we'd hoped for to sell how cold it was the night Titanic sank.
If we refrigerate the stage, we can't heat the water. Because if we heat the water and refrigerate the stage, we're going to get steam coming off of the water. and we came up with the solution of adding digital breath.
Why ain't they tanning?
And a good hug. What we're doing is we're shooting the breath element in such a way that all we see on the film is the breath coming out of the person's mouth. The person is behind a black mask, and all we capture is just this delicate breath material going by. The room's chilled with these big air conditioners. It ranges between 42 and 48 degrees, and we need to composite that on top of those actors. It's about 100 shots, roughly. It just makes it look like it's actually there.
We're volunteer guinea pigs. We've duplicated what the extras will be wearing, and we're trying to determine what's a safe period of time for them to be in the water. We're asking the people to do it, so I thought if I couldn't do it, why would I ask anyone else to?
We determined from this test that our extras could safely spend several hours at a stretch in our unheated outdoor tank.
The tank was very cold. If you're going to be in a tank for 11 hours, it's not so nice.
We provided warm water hoses and hot tubs to help the extras stay comfortable. The extras were so dedicated. They were such troopers, even when playing dead.
Great job, everybody. This background is the best in the world. Thank you. Let's cheer for yourself. Let's cheer for everybody. You're great.
The dead makeup was amazing. I did get my hair done up with wax in it. After that, they put spirit gum with these little crystals of gelatin that were very hard when they first were applied, but as soon as they were sprayed with mist or got wet, they expanded. And so you had all this gelatin-like stuff on your face.
I like that one. What's that feel?
That was not an attractive look.
Ken Marshall's paintings were amazing. I mean, they were the Bible for Jim. One of Ken's beautiful paintings is the Carpathia and the lifeboats going towards it. So the job was to recreate that shot.
The lifeboat sequence with the Carpathia was the only time we went on the open water for any of the period filming.
You don't realize how difficult it is to do something in the actual real ocean until you go there and do it.
Ready and rise!
Just to row a lifeboat next to each other in the open ocean, and not only 2, but 3 or 4, and you realize this is what it was like for the people in the lifeboat right after the Titanic sank, just drifting in the ocean.
After the Carpathia arrived back in New York and the passengers came ashore, the unsinkable Molly Brown, as she was later known, commissioned these medals to be awarded to the Carpathia's captain and officers and crew just out of appreciation for the rescue and for just expressing the survivors' gratitude for everything that was done on their behalf.
How you end a movie is so important, especially when you have a love story in which your main characters don't get to live happily ever after together. The challenge is, how can you create a hopeful beat when most of your main characters die tragically, and do so 74 years before the ending of your movie? I think one of the keys to the film's success was that Jim was able to create an ending that in one shot turned what could have been a bittersweet, tragic ending, a real downer, into something beautiful and emotionally satisfying. Jack and Rose coming together was exactly how Jim had scripted it from the very beginning. It was the longest single shot in the film, but it was filmed in a lot of pieces that had to flow together seamlessly. We shot all of Rose's photos with a motion control system so we could fly this big camera very precisely from one picture to another, moving very close over Gloria Stewart's face. We then transitioned to our 20th scale rec model, where we really wanted to capture the feeling of artist Ken Marshall's paintings. This was the handheld pre-visualization pass where Jim worked out the camera move. From there, we transitioned again to a larger scale promenade deck model in both wrecked and pristine states, and finally morphed to Jimmy Muro's Steadicam shot going into the grand staircase set with all the actors. It was kind of like a theatrical curtain call.
That is how I know you go on.
James Horner wrote the song. It's called My Heart Will Go On, and it's a beautiful, beautiful song that goes very, very well with the movie.
And spaces between us.
Through the whole movie, it's only music. All the songs that are being played in the movie, it's only music. And it's the only singing song with words. So I feel very honored that they have chosen it. It is very different for me because I don't feel like it's a video set. For the first time, I feel like it's a movie set. Having green stuff behind me, and they have built a boat for me. Oh, how lucky I am. Is my boat ready?
So this is the real Titanic as she lies at the bottom of the ocean, shot in 35mm film by us in 1995 when we went out there in the early days of making the movie. You know, I've joked many times over the years that I only made this movie because I wanted to go dive to the Titanic wreck. I've been a wreck diver for many years at scuba depths. I love shipwrecks. I love the romance and the mystery of shipwrecks. I love the fact that every shipwreck is a human story. I mean, ships are not on the bottom of the ocean by design. They're on the bottom of the ocean because something really bad happened, and there were people on those ships. They're not unmanned vehicles. So the story of those people, whether it's a story of a wartime encounter with a U-boat, or an encounter between a luxury liner and an iceberg, they're fascinating stories. So I've always loved wrecks, and Titanic's the ultimate wreck. So what I did was I went to 20th Century Fox, and I had a good relationship with them. I'd made a couple films for them, and I said, let's do a real expedition to Titanic to shoot scenes for the movie. They thought I was crazy. But then I told them my rationale, and the rationale was that we're going to have to do these scenes as miniatures. The miniatures are going to be probably more expensive than going and shooting it ourselves. We can use the Russians, we'll use the Russian subs. The marketing value of us having gone and photographed the real ship at the bottom of the ocean will be tremendous. It'll be worth millions in publicity to the movie. So these are some very ambitious shots. I mean, we went out there with a mission, and the mission was to make a movie 2.5 miles down in the Atlantic. So first step was we needed a movie camera. So I talked to my brother Mike about the technical problems of shooting at that depth. No one had ever shot with a movie camera at that depth, other than sort of just poking it up to the viewport of a submersible. But we wanted to have a camera that was outside the sub that we could pan and tilt and do beautiful cinematic kind of moves with. And so that involved building a pan and tilt mechanism, a remote device that was outside the sub. We had to design a camera housing. We had to design a 35mm camera that could fit in that housing. We went down there on this expedition. We dove Titanic, I think, 10 or 11 times out of 12 deep dives on this expedition. And we had about 12 minutes of footage on each dive. So we were down there for 10 to 14 hours. So this is Al Giddings on the right. He was my underwater DP on the Abyss, and he had introduced me to Robert Ballard and kind of put me down the path of meeting all the Titanic people involved, including the Russians. This is Snoop Dogg, which is a remotely operated vehicle that we built ourselves. Actually, Scott Millard at Western Space and Marine built it for us. And this is a robot that really worked. It really worked at 12,000 feet down with this tremendous water pressure, 5,000 pounds per square inch. This thing worked. And we weren't supposed to, I had set myself a limitation that I wasn't going to actually take the Snoop Dogg inside the wreck of the ship. Here we are at the D-deck gangway door on the port side. And I promised myself I wasn't going to really go inside. But of course, I couldn't contain my enthusiasm once we saw how well this vehicle was working. And now, compared to the vehicles we're using now, it's a clunky, heavy, big dumb dope on a rope. But this is 10 years ago, and it was pretty state of the art for its time. And here we are, crossing the forward well deck. And Titanic, it's tough to see this whole ship. It's just so darn big, and even the 1200 watt HMI lights don't really light it up. Just small sections of it. That's the B deck railing on the starboard side forward, and it's right where we had Rose standing on one of the shots that were taken out of the film. This is one of the first times that an ROV was really used to poke around inside the shipwreck, and we were just enthralled by what we were seeing. So here Snoop Dogg is being piloted aft along the B deck promenade on the B deck level, and it gets to a door that it can't pass, and it's sort of looking in a window. It's just mysterious what's inside that window. There's no way to know. And of course, in the 2001 expedition, we actually got behind that window and had a look, and we know what's in there now. So this is Jeff Letta. He was the ROV pilot. And here's another, this is, I think, our last dive, and we're sending the ROV down into the Grand Staircase. And the Grand Staircase is just this big open pit that goes down through the ship, 5 decks down inside the ship. And here he is going down. This is just a a bulkhead that's just covered with rusticles. And here's a beautiful view down the grand staircase, level after level, A deck, B deck, C deck, D deck, all the way down to where the dining room was at the bottom. Now, so far we haven't done anything radical. Robert Ballard, back in 1986, when he went down there for the first human dives, this is what the grand staircase looked like back then. When he went down there in 1986, he took his ROV, which is called Jason Jr., he went down into the grand staircase. But they literally went straight down the center. And I don't think they looked down and saw this whole footing arrangement. This is when we knew that there really was still a lot of structure down inside Titanic. And, we're going down, this is looking into the A deck level. You can see a little glimpse of a chandelier there. From what we know in the on our 2001 expedition, those chandeliers are still there, just the way we saw them in '95. Here you see the ROV going down one more deck level. It's going down from A deck to B deck, and it's going to scoot in here in a second into the B deck level. And this was all new. This was all new territory. Nobody had ever really done this before. I think that shot's actually in the movie. So here we are going in on B deck, and we're heading aft here. This was all just ridiculously exciting for me. I mean, to be flying an ROV around inside the Titanic, I mean, it was just great. And here's a view looking back, and you can see one of the chandeliers just kind of overgrown with deep sea animals that are sitting there filter feeding in the current. And now we're heading aft. You can see the boiler uptake. So this is all just really exciting for us. And, I wasn't supposed to take our movie prop vehicle inside Titanic and do real exploration, but we just couldn't resist. Eventually we go through this doorway that you see back here in the back, and we go into this suite. Now, this used to be one of the most luxurious suites on the ship. It doesn't look like much now. All the wooden walls are kind of decomposed, and all the wiring that was in those walls is just kind of hanging down. That's the doorway that leads outside to the private promenade deck. And we couldn't get Snoop out there. It wouldn't fit through that door. But here you can see the Mir submersible maneuvering around outside the wreck. We thought that was pretty cool beans back in those days to have done a coordinated move like that. Of course, we did tons of that stuff in 2001, but we were just sort of finding our feet here. And this was a big find. This was the firebox of the fireplace in this first-class suite, and with this Galathea crab, crawling over the hearth. I just love the juxtaposition of that. Here you see a perfectly preserved wall sconce with a kind of ribbon design, a bronze ribbon design. And this is what that sconce and that firebox would have looked like. That's an actual photograph of the room. So we were pretty excited. We were like big time deep ocean explorers here. And we brought all this stuff back and showed it to Fox a good year before we actually started shooting the scenes with sets and actors on the movie. But as far as I'm concerned, I was committed to make the film at that point. Fox had spent a couple of $1 million to do this expedition and to get this footage. I'd already written the treatment. I still had to write the script. But I told them, this expedition commits me to you to make this movie. So in a way, I kind of sold it to them as like a cheap way to do a pay-or-play deal. And they bought it on that basis as well. I also got hooked on the whole bug of deep ocean exploration. So, of course, as soon as the movie was done, I was immediately planning my next expedition. It took us a couple of years to get it pulled together. The film was done, and then the whole awards, season and all that was over by spring of '98. And by summer of 2001, we had built our new generation of robotics and gone back out there again and explored deep inside the wreck. So this is coming down to the D deck level. And again, we're doing this with this big clunky robot, Snoop Dogg. Oops. Boom. So here we are coming down to the D deck level. This is the D deck reception area, and we explored this thoroughly in 2001. But in '95, nobody had ever been in here, not since the ship sank in 1912. And it was really exciting to see that woodwork still survived. I mean, here was carved oak decorative post. I mean, there's a steel post up the middle and this carved oak covering. And we were just so excited. You can even see where the paint still exists down in the bottoms of some of the carving, the white paint, because this whole room was painted white. And we said, wow, you know, Titanic's still down there. It's just away from the prying eyes that have been here before. If we could just get deeper in, imagine what we might see. So we drove our robot, which was ill-designed for this type of thing, deeper and deeper into the ship, and we got this glimpse of this door, which is in the port side entry vestibule. And this is a bronze decorative screen in the door, and you can see the handle on the door and so on. And this is the real ship. Now, we put a few shots from this ROV material in the movie. Then we matched it with some stuff that we shot in a tank down in Escondido, down near San Diego. This is what one of those doors would have looked like in the day. And this is what we photographed with Snoop Dogg way down, 5 decks down inside the ship. And we just really felt like we'd done something really cool, because the previous conclusion by prior expeditions was that none of the woodwork survived anywhere in the ship. And so we knew this is looking into the darkness here and wondering what was beyond, what's down there, This is what led me to want to go back and explore it thoroughly with new technology later. And of course, it also set a level of excellence for the rest of the movie. The movie itself, the sets and the costumes and everything, all had to live up to the level that we had set by going down to the wreck and by filming the real wreck. And maybe that had an impact on the budget. Maybe the fact that it was not that I was telling everybody every day, you have to live up to what we've already done. It's just that they felt this kind of obligation to do their best professionally. And sometimes when people do their best, it costs more money. And, who knows how much of that imbued the film with some of its quality. Did we need to do it? It's really unknown. I don't see how you can look at some, alternate universe where we didn't go to Titanic, but we made the movie Titanic, and say that the movie would have been just as good. Frankly, I don't think it would have, because my passion for the film would not have been as strong as it was. I felt like, in a weird way, I felt like I owed it to Titanic. I know that sounds strange, but when you go to a place like this, you go to a place of great tragedy where people have died, and you explore it and you see it, it becomes a part of your life, and you become connected to that story, and you become connected to that tragedy. So as a result, I felt a kind of a mandate to do my best as a filmmaker to tell that story. So a lot of the things that we shot that were of historical interest and weren't necessarily part of the Jack and Rose story, let's say, I probably shot those things as I felt like I had to tell Titanic's story. I had to tell the story of the other people who were on board. So a lot of the scenes that are in the deleted scenes here in the special edition probably were in existence because of our trip to the wreck. I guess it infected us with this sense that we were the bearers of the tale, and we had to do a good job. So going to the shipwreck may have had a direct connection to how well the film did, or how well the film was received. I don't know. I can't parse it out. To me, it was all part of the process of making that movie. So here we're actually looking. This is the shot right here that really, we were at the limit of our tether. We couldn't go any further, and yet we were looking down this corridor, down into a black corridor, and I wondered what was down that corridor. I knew it led forward along D-deck. I knew it went to a bunch of first-class cabins. I really wanted to see what was down that corridor, and it was that shot that made me want to come back, and why we went back in 2001 with robots, and we did go down that corridor, and we saw some amazing things. And that's what happens. It's the things that are just at the limits of your lights that sort of beckon you. See that dark corridor right in the middle there? It doesn't look like a corridor, it just looks like a dark spot, but I knew it was a corridor because we were looking at the deck plans. And so we kind of knew where we were. The elegance occasionally emerges from behind these rusticles. When you first see it, it kind of looks like some kind of grotto, some kind of underwater cave. And here you're seeing a big rusticle lying on top of the vehicle is what you're seeing there. The vehicle is actually pinned to the floor by a big chunk of rust. And here you see how not to drive an ROV, where we've actually wrapped our umbilical around a post. And that was pretty tricky for us to get out of that spot. But we got the Snoop Dogg back, and we got it back on the sub, and we got it back to the ship, and we actually used it for a bunch of underwater shooting later when we were actually making the movie. And this shows how we actually recovered the Snoop Dogg. We had to actually pull its tether out from inside the wreck. It was hooked on something, so we had to pull it out with the mechanical manipulator arm on the submersible. These are not recommended procedures, but it all worked. And we managed to get all our gear back and leave Titanic.
Got a good shot on this thing?
Yes.
Well, here it is, the moment of truth. Here's where we find out if all the time, the sweat, the money to charter this ship and these submersibles to come out here to the middle of the North Atlantic were worth it.
Go Union, live better.
Love, exciting and new. Come aboard, we're expecting you.
I feel like I'm on top of the world.
Hey Jack, I feel like I'm flying.
You know what I mean? 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 You know what I mean?
Don't push too hard, Anatoly. Don't.
Whoa. You just sunk this up. You just sunk it.
Killed us all.
Man.
Shh. We've been counting the number of times Josh says, shh.
He's our first AD, and he says, shh, all day long. So we counted him. 967.
967.
And Lynn Hockney, our choreographer, has created a piece called The Titanic Shuffle. And it goes, ready guys, join in.
Over here.
We're going to do it.
Doing a chain?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
This is high tech.
The chain.
She gets paid millions.
Lisa's got 2, 3, and...
Where are you going?
And it's interesting because there's a different relationship between. Excuse me. Between me and Jim and some other people.
You want to take it from the story, just so we all know where we are? All right. That's how we lost our first fortune.
That's how we lost our first fortune.
And even when I'm nowhere near water, I still wear my decor. Decades before decor was even invented, people still thought of decor.
That Martin, he's crazy.
I like that man.
Here we are in the Titanic makeup room, and the first step in making up the first-class women is removing their beards and mustaches, which are stored on the wall so that they can be returned to their owners at the end of the day.
Мир 2, я мир 1. Глубина 3700 метров, до грунта 80. Как меня поняли, прием.
Broadway thrills to a new motion picture, little realizing the months of effort by thousands of workers that went into the making of these 2 hours of entertainment. Come with us to Hollywood. The studio is a beehive of activity. After months of research, the final draft of the scenario is written. The casting office engages thousands of players. Costumes are designed, and miles of materials are used in their creation. Blueprints are drawn for the settings. Machinery hums in the huge mill, and 1,001 other important details are carried out before the big day when production actually begins. Then, we find ourselves on a soundstage where Cecil B. DeMille, the director, is making a last-minute survey of the set. Mr. DeMille, if we're not too presumptuous, would you mind explaining just what you're doing with those gadgets?
They can then start to lower one end and just sink the whole thing.
Oh my God.
These big hydraulic ramps. That's the theory. Now, no one's ever done this before. They keep telling me it's going to work.
Is it like a one-shot deal? Or?
No, it can't be because we have so much coverage to do in here. We have them when they first come down, so we'll be in here for 2 or 3 days.
You know, this isn't a fantasy, this is history. We spend thousands and thousands of dollars on research. We comb the museums of the world. All right, now you people, you're seeing these men who are leaving you, perhaps for all time. They're your fathers, your brothers, your husbands. Let me see that in your faces. Come on now, work yourselves into the emotion of such a scene. The making of a picture of such large dimensions as
Titanic
is not the work of any one man. The director only guides the many geniuses that are under him. And I hope in
Titanic
you think that the work of these many minds that have given up so much time and energy to bringing back this wonderful story, this astonishing love story, meets with your approval.
B! 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 What's that spell?
Help me! Can you hear me? Help me!
We've made 15,965 cappuccinos in what, 3 months? 3 months. There you go.
Actually, the only thing that matched up perfect was the fresh fish. 11,000 pounds of each on the show and on the boat.
Original boat. That. Yeah. But Jimmy, just watch your final height so you don't get into the flags behind Jonathan's head. Otherwise, it's more work for Rob, even though I don't care.
Okay. All right. Stand by, everybody.
Because we know we have money, we have lots of money left over. Everything's going like butter. Everything's just smooth
Constantly
as can
online.
be. Yeah, it's just. I've never been on a job where everything just went like clockwork like that.
It's amazing.
It is startling. I don't even know what to do. I mean, and Fox doesn't want the money back. You know, they've already allocated it for the movie. They don't want any more cash back. So, orphanages they get to benefit by our good fortune.
That was good. That was a lot better, but this time use more of your throat and hawk it back and.
I did.
Just a little bit of spit, you know?
The caterers have been looking for their whisk.
They have actually.
Have they?
They have actually. It's just too bad.
I am the Cracker Jack man.
Ladies and gentlemen, listen up.
Righto. What do you think? Should we do another one?
On Monday, we have good weather. We have good weather. We will be on either the bow or the A-deck promenade port. Scene 72, the bow 94, 96, which will come right back here to the port boat deck. Scene 161, 165. Okay, boat deployments, Murdoch, where the passengers, etc. If we have inclement weather, we will start with scene 80 on stage 2, which is Kate joining Julio for the rendezvous for the party. Then we'll go down to 292. Kate comes down and rendezvous with Heaven Titanic. Okay, we all clear. Now, Jim, all the boats here. Not to the other side.
Listen, Rose, I trust you. Go!
We never found anything on Jack. There's no record of him at all.
No, there wouldn't be, would there? And I've never spoken of him until now.
Here we are on the bridge of the set of Titanic, and down here there was just quite an altercation. Jim got so upset with a cast member that he turned on his freezing rays and shattered him. But that wasn't enough. He's now scattering the remains all over the forward well deck.
Start the swimmers swimming.
He's crazy.
I like that man. This is a ship of fools. If you look closely enough, you may even find yourself on board.
You may find yourself living in a shotgun shack, and you may find yourself in another part of the world, and you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile, and you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground into the blue again. After the money's gone, once in a lifetime, water flowing underground. And you may ask yourself, how do I work this? And you may ask yourself, where is that large automobile? And you may tell yourself,
pre-visualization is your best tool to attacking a project of this scope and scale. Jim would work with a lipstick video camera to pre-visualize big sweeping crane moves or very subtle dolly moves on the deck. By doing the pre-visualization, we realized what angles we would need and how much of the set we needed to build. Videomatics also gave Jim and the production team the ability to experiment with camera angles and get the sense of the capabilities of the equipment that was available for the film. Not only did we build scale models of the ship and sets, we also built scale models of the various camera equipment, such as the Aquila crane and lighting tower, so that we could ascertain whether that equipment would work for the size of the sets we were building. These videomatics were then edited together into sequences and intercut with storyboards that were also drawn from the images of the videomatics themselves. The most extensive sequence that was covered with videomatics was the sinking sequence. There were so many complex events and effects that had to go into achieving the sequence that we had to completely cover it in order to break down the beats. So, we shot the scale model of the ship against a mile-our ocean to create the reflective surface of the calm ocean the night of the sinking. Plus, Jim had a lot of very specific shots in his head that he wanted to get on the screen, so we were able to get a definitive visual reference that could be shown not only to facilities like Digital Domain, but also to the actors to help them visualize the scenes and to the various department heads so that they knew exactly how much they had to build. Nowadays, this kind of pre-visualization is mostly done with computer graphics, but using a small lipstick-sized video camera on an actual model gave Jim the creative freedom to explore the best ways to shoot the scenes. There's something more spontaneous about being able to physically move a camera over a set, even in a miniature. It's more tactile for a filmmaker and much more akin to what it was like to shoot on the set than doing it in a computer. It's really a testament not only to Jim's vision, but to all of the departments and effects teams that many of the shots in the film look exactly like the original videomatics, many of which were shot nearly 2 years before the final shots were completed. Videomatics were particularly important for the deep dive preparation, when it takes 10 hours each way to get to and from your shooting location, and when you only have 10 minutes of film in the camera, you have to plan things to the nth degree. Plus, visuals were the common language that everyone could understand. The Russian subpilots could see that if they could maneuver their submersibles to a certain place in relation to the wreck, this is what they would see through their viewports, and also see what the camera would see. That way, when everyone got down to the wreck, there would be no confusion as to the goal of each dive, to get the shots Jim needed and the shots that he had videomaticked.
and I were standing on this very tiny section, which was the bow of the ship. We're doing the kiss, we're laughing, we're singing, we're having a scream the way we always do, and then suddenly this whole bloody thing starts to turn and rise up into the air, about 30 feet. It was like being on a fair ride, though. It was really good fun. I loved it. I was squealing, and I was going, oh, isn't this fun? Let's do it again.
Another example of Jim, cutting back on something is the First Class Lounge, where that was a set that we knew needed to be flooded, and we knew we needed to build a model to do the flooding sequence. So rather than building a $400,000 full-scale set, Jim elected to only build the model, and then the whole scene with Kate having tea and looking over at the little girl is done with green screens, fitting her into the model of the First Class Lounge, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars. Although we spent tens of thousands of dollars on the visual effects costs, the net savings was significant.
The funny thing is I wasn't a big fanatic about Titanic, and then when the wreck was found by the Woods Hole team in 1985, I was very interested in the technology of deep ocean exploration, and I wound up doing a film called The Abyss. And part of my research for that was to go to Woods Hole and actually see the little robot, Jason Jr., that had explored Titanic and gone down inside the grand staircase and so on. That was really exciting. And one day I was just sitting in my media room with all my VHS tapes at the time, and my eye just happened to fall on a tape of A Night to Remember. And I thought, now the ship's been found. Maybe there's a story here. So I watched the film and I really realized what an amazing, historic, epic novel Titanic is, except it's not a novel. It really happened. And I thought, there's an opportunity here to tell a story with a present-day wraparound that's about exploration and the new technology, and it takes us back in time. And then, of course, I immediately thought, what's the best way to tell this story? Well, as a love story.
Open your eyes.
And that's how I pitched it to 20th Century Fox. I hadn't written a word. I took in Ken Marshall's book, An Illustrated History of Titanic, and right in the center is a double-fold painting, and it shows the Titanic sinking with its lights blazing and the lifeboats rowing away in a pitch-black, calm sea. It's just so beautiful, so epic, so tragic. I slapped that down on the table in front of the Fox executives, and I said, Romeo and Juliet on that ship. Bingo, they were hooked.
Jim gave me a scriptment for something that was called Planet Ice. And Planet Ice was the code name for what became Titanic.
It was the movie, basically, but it didn't have much dialogue, the odd line here and there. Loved it. I thought, well, this is something I feel very passionately about, and I want to get myself this part.
I said to myself, this could be one of the last times where Hollywood makes an old-fashioned film. It was this classic cross-class love story where you can build sets that are 900 feet, where you could bring out 1,000 extras and dress them in wardrobe, and all of those challenges that came along with that. And that really excited me.
And action.
People used to criticize the film, saying, how's this going to work? We know how it ends. The film's power comes from the fact that you know what's going to happen. We all know the ship sinks. It's not a question of does the ship sink? It's where are you, what are you experiencing when it's sinking, and how much do you feel like you're on board? We're pretty cheeky about it. We actually show you the ship sinking in the first 10 minutes of the film. We have an animation. We say, okay, the ship does this, and it tilts up, and it breaks, and the stern sinks like this. We show you the whole thing.
Of course, the experience of it was somewhat different.
And that only makes us want to see the real thing even more. So we're not trying to fool you that we don't know that you know the ending of the movie. But of course you don't know the ending of the movie because it's the way in which it plays out. The story's told from Rose's perspective.
It's been 84 years, and I can still smell the fresh paint.
We needed to find the best actors and actresses who could be chameleons. And when you would watch the movie, you're not sitting there saying, oh, that's this star playing that role, or that's this star playing that role. So we did an old-fashioned screen test. We found a period set that was standing for a television show. We went on to it, brought in a number of actresses, and out of that, one actress really shined, and that was Kate Winslet.
Titanic was the most exciting audition that I had ever been on. I wanted it so badly. All you want to do is to prove to the director that you are good enough to play that part. And so you just dig deep and try hard and do the best you can.
We were lucky enough to then have Kate in town when Leo was in town.
And I was sure of Leo when I saw him read with Kate for 5 minutes. He snapped into character, he became Jack for 5 minutes, and then he stepped back to being Leo.
And after Leo left, Kate said to Jim, even if you don't hire me, you have to hire him.
I just had so much respect for him that I just couldn't wait to really share in the experience with him because I knew it would be challenging, I knew it would be exciting.
Kate told me how much she really loved the role and believed she could do it, believed in herself. She sent me a rose with a note that basically said, I'm ready. A 19-year-old girl that's going to carry a film of that scale on her shoulders, it's a huge responsibility. And you're standing on a set surrounded by 2,000 extras, and all the lights and cameras are pointed at you. And if you don't bring it off, it doesn't work. And a lot of people would have imploded under that, but she didn't.
It's all in a day's work.
It's hard to remember they weren't actual big stars at the time. Our LA Film Critics group, which I was a part of, gave Leo our Promising Newcomer Award not too long before that. So he was quite young, and this helped make him
superstar.
Where to, miss?
Kate Winslet is not the most obvious choice. She's playing an American, and she wasn't a household name, but she's just luminous and wonderful, and found both of them are.
Ain't nothing to it, is there, Jack? Remember, they love money, so just pretend like you own a gold mine, and you're in the club.
I'll probably cut to kind of a medium of this group on this side of the table.
The supporting cast is so well selected that these people, just in the slightest gestures, their class position is very beautifully defined.
Jim really provided us with every bit of historia that we could get our hands on. To me, Molly Brown was the American spirit, the American West. I did research about her. I thought it was interesting that I looked a little similar to her. She was the nouveau riche. Her husband had made their money in a silver mine. And so she was really trying to claw her way up the social ladder, but it didn't change who she was as a woman.
The similarity between some of the actors and actresses and their real life characters is really impressive. And I actually went around to each of the actors and talked to them about their character. I thought that Kathy Bates did a wonderful job with Molly Brown. I thought that she made her the warm person she probably was.
This was odd, and it looks the same as it did the last time I saw it.
And then Gloria Stewart, I was thrilled because she's the leading lady in 2 John Ford films, The Prisoner of Shark Island and Airmail, which are both good 1930s films, and she was one of the most beautiful actresses in the 30s.
Gloria ended up becoming a dear, dear, dear friend of mine, and I can easily say she was my best friend, even though she was 51 years older than me. She was a consummate professional, always full of humor and laughter and witty conversations.
We had this whole wave gag prepared. We don't need it because we actually got the set to sink the way the Titanic really sank. It was identical to the way it's been described by every eyewitness account of what happened.
When I first heard that he was directing this film, it was a question for me of how realistic was he intending to make this? Because if it was going to be extremely fictional, I'm not sure that I would have wanted to have been involved as a historian. But once I found out that it was going to be as factual as possible, I really wanted to be on board at that point.
I wanted to bring Titanic back to life in all its majesty. It's a simplification to say it's a character, but it does have a life. And at the end, we gave it groans, agonized groans, like it was some dying creature. It's really a world, and you live in the world of that ship.
Jim's a Titanic nut, like the rest of us, and that's a harsh word. We have all sorts of names, Titaniacs and Titanic enthusiasts.
The description I read, and I don't know if it was from you or somebody else, was that he had to climb over some women and kind of just step right on them to cut the fall. So my presumption was he had to have been away from one end of the boat or the other. So I just stuck with the middle.
Yeah. With my familiarity with the ship's appearance, my job at Lightstorm on project was to advise the set designers and then later the craftsmen and the model building crew at Digital Domain to try to get the sets and the models, the miniatures, as accurate as we could.
All the care that he put into the settings and the right designs on everything and not cutting corners and not faking it, he makes you believe in that story, and that helps the actors to have all those settings that they can then imagine that they're actually back in that time period. I bet that was very powerful for the actors.
Jim writes a movie that there's no studio where he can make the film. So in Jim's world, it's like, well, then we'll build the studio. Just, okay, Jim, all right.
Upon arrival to set, the first impact was they built a city to make a movie. It was unlike any backlot moment that's ever been depicted. It was like entering Metropolis or something.
It was such almost a scale, the set that we were on. It was really impressive. So you started to appreciate, wow, we're on something pretty spectacular here.
You go up in the elevator and you walk out, and it's 1912. He created the whole first-class lounge, the stairway, the carpeting was the same. The table they had set with silverware that had the White Star Line logo on everything. Even the matchbox holders had the White Star logo.
Having studied Titanic years past, it was instantly recognizable as the ship. This was not some kind of Titanic-looking thing. This looked like Titanic.
Great. Doesn't this look great?
Everybody's transformed. You walk out and you're not the same person you were when you walked in. So you really experienced what it must have felt like.
The construction people referred to it as stage one. I never did, because to me it was Titanic. To me, it was walking the decks of the ship. And we didn't refer to it as a set, and we didn't think of it as a set.
It's just like my paintings come to life.
And I knew that around this corner, I would find the second-class entrance, exactly where the second-class entrance on the aft end of the boat deck is supposed to be, and there it is. It was just indescribable.
We have a duty to the event because we have to show it respect and try and get it as accurately portrayed as possible. And I think all the actors who played characters who were named on the ship had that feeling that we had to do it justice, really. We had to make sure that people understood what had gone on that night.
Everybody goes on action.
I'd heard all these incredible stories about the set, and when I get down there and I see this ship.
Okay, let's rehearse it again, please.
Jim's up on a construction crane. It's nighttime. There's 700 extras running towards the bow. He's directing a scene. I'm sitting below, and I just completely got goosebumps thinking, gosh, I bet this is exactly what it looked like.
I appreciate Jim more now, I think, looking back and seeing the enormity of what he accomplished and being there and remembering being in a lifeboat and turning and seeing other lifeboats coming down halfway and people screaming and all of this going on in this huge space at the edge of the Pacific Ocean. That's an image that I'll never forget, and that Jim had brought all of that into being. He was very exacting with his crew and with us. I respect tremendously what he accomplished with this film. It was very difficult because the ship went down at night. So it was all night shoots.
The studios, they built dressing rooms. We had suites next to each other, so we were in a college dorm for the better part of a year.
There was a real sense of camaraderie. It was great.
I think we should put some black stains on this,
Sure.
like where it's corroded the metal, and maybe
and on
cut
this
into
one
it a
too.
little bit.
Maybe so. I had left something on the set and I came back from my dressing room. Everybody had been wrapped. And Jim was over at the table where they had all the props, and he was hand painting the comb that Gloria uses in the scene where she looks at the hair comb, which is pretty remarkable.
They finished the scene one night. It hadn't gone really well, and as I walked around the front of the ship, and Jim said, why is this like a war? I said, because you're a general.
Every film's a military operation, and if there was administrative tension and pressure put upon him, he never let it show and didn't carry it to set, because there was a lot of other pressure and tension and safety and things that you had to deal with. He was the first in the water, last out. That was huge, but he never asked anyone to do anything he wouldn't, and he was a great leader.
All right, let's hear it for the stunt team.
Making films is incredibly hard. When you take a real-life story, a ship of that size, you know, the number of cast members that we had, just extras alone, not to mention stunt crew. It was difficult for everybody, but it was hardest of all for Jim, for definite, you know. I mean, he was responsible for everybody and everything, and he had studios to answer to at the beginning and the end of every day.
So if you felt tired, you really felt like an idiot. You couldn't really complain, because there he was every day, all the time. He was tireless.
And his enthusiasm was what came across more than anything else, and his knowledge of the whole event, phenomenal.
It was extraordinary. I got to be there during the night shooting and be up on the ship, and I had certainly never seen anything like it till then, and I certainly haven't seen anything like it since.
He thinks that it's overwhelming in a good way. You mean overwhelming in a bad way. That's why I mean it's a carefully chosen word.
Right, so
It's
maybe I
not-
should just go.
The costumes and being on set and that moment when they say action, there is a magic that happens. There really is. You know, you can rehearse, you can prepare, you can live it, you can breathe it, you can be as ready as you think you need to be. But until you put your costume on and until that first day when someone says, and action, something happens. It's just the most extraordinary thing. And still now I really feel that.
After a scene, it would really take her some time to get out of that, especially the more emotional the scene, the more it would impact her. Leo, on the other hand, could really slip in and out of character very easily. Even something as powerful as the death scene. It's cut. It's over. I'm alive. it's all's well. So they just dealt with their craft very differently. Both gave fantastic performances, and they were the best of friends.
The sort of mutual respect that we had for each other before we started working together really did lend itself to the beginning of a great friendship, because it was built on very strong foundations. It was nothing to do with, like, you know, kind of fancying the other one or any sort of flirting or anything like that. That just never happened. And I think that's part of the reason why the friendship has always been so sincere. We've just been very, very lucky to have always had that and been able to hang on to it.
It took us an entire shooting day just to figure out how to get this ship to sink fast enough to really do the action.
John Landau was like an oasis for me. I loved going to his office and talking to him. He was so calm and so supportive and so smart. He had a huge responsibility. I'm sure it was more stressful for him than he let on.
This is my after lunch shot list. My before lunch shot list had dropping that cylinder to make a wave, which we're not doing now because we don't need it because we made our own.
When we were in the process of making the film, it was very difficult. There were people out there talking about how we were going to bring down the studio.
We couldn't fail because everyone was anticipating that we would fail. Everybody's got it all on the line, not just financially, but artistically, aesthetically, you're all in. And that's a big target.
Jim's a different customer than I think a lot of the studio bosses we're used to dealing with. This was an artist of such uncompromising integrity that he didn't care if it was 5 or 10 years of his life to make this film and that he walked away not making a dime, as long as he kept the integrity of the vision that he had for this story as a film.
Well, the buzz was horrific. We were the biggest idiots in the history of Hollywood, and we were going to go down in flames like nobody'd seen, and this was going to be the biggest bomb in history. And this is going on while we're trying to make the film, while we're trying to finish the film. We're struggling with being over budget on visual effects and trying to make our deadline. And Variety is running Titanic Watch, this little column on the front page of Variety every single day. It was just this constant shelling, this constant bombardment.
We had a pretty vicious piece that was suggesting there were all sorts of safety issues, which could not have been further from the truth. Jim is the safest director in the world.
Flooding will be very rapid, so we have water movement issues. It'll be turning things over, moving furniture around. We're going to probably do it once just to see what happens.
Titanic demanded every ounce of attention and effort and passion he had every day for months on end. He just had to stick his head down, get the job done, make the best movie he could, but the focus and the intensity continue throughout.
While the buzz was very unpopular on Titanic while we were making the film, these people had not read the script. These people had not seen a foot of dailies. These people had not visited our set. The people who had done those things, they waited for their articles. When you came down to Rosarito, Mexico, and you'd come up over a little knoll, and out there on the horizon was the Titanic, that alone was impressive. And when you saw Kate and Leo and performances that they gave us, that was impressive.
The footage we started getting was just remarkable footage.
Jack! Jack! There's a boat, Jack!
We could have tried to cut $30, $40 million out at some point. We could have said, cut $20 million out of your special effects budget. We could have done any number of things. And what I ultimately felt, and ultimately what the company felt, was that our only hope was to plow full speed ahead and try and make a great movie.
Cut! Great job, everybody. Do it for yourself. Cheers for everybody. You're great.
The experience was amazing, and I learned so much, and the team spirit, actually, that existed very much between the cast and the crew, all of us together, that was something that was very, very valuable and really kind of got us through it, actually, because there were some wonderful people involved, and we all really counted on each other for that support.
I knew that there wasn't going to be anything else that came my way in my life as an actor that would come anywhere close to this experience. The people who are on that movie, and we see each other, from time to time, we're incredibly proud of what we did, each and every one of us.
Post-production to me was as pressure-filled as production. We had gotten through the shoot. We had seen the footage we were getting. Now we had to create the best movie.
In the midst of all of this, we finally had to appear at Show West and show some film. And Show West is a big annual confab exclusively for the industry and media. It's usually everybody's first peek at the upcoming release slate.
Seeing her coming out of the darkness like a ghost ship still gets me every time.
We put together this 5-ish minute piece, and from then on, every time somebody wrote something negative about us, at the end of the piece they'd say, but it might be good. You know, rumor has it might be kind of fun to see.
But then we had this release date looming that was originally July 2nd, and then Jim committed to the studio that he would be done by July 31st. And I had to call Peter Chernin and say to him, Jim will make that date, Peter, but he needs more time. And we fortunately moved our release date back to December. Had we not done that, history would have played out very differently.
To me, the editing room was my bunker. And I said, I'm not coming out of this bunker till I have a great movie. I figured my career was over, and I'd already sort of given up my salary on this. There was no hope of making a dime, and I probably would never get to direct again. But I was going to go down swinging. We were going to make the best possible movie we could. I took a razor blade and I taped it to the screen of my Avid on the edge of the screen, and I wrote on it, use in case film sucks. And I didn't have to use it.
Jim did one of his friends and family screenings, which he likes to do to get feedback from 25 or 30 people close to him. And it was long. Everything we loved about the movie was there. It was just a question of what to give up.
It'll just slow me down, impede my stroke.
Right you are, Mr. Macaulay. It is 700 miles to shore, so you wouldn't want to do anything to impede your stroke.
There was a moment where the tide turned for us. It was the first screening that we did, a recruited sneak. We snuck off to the Mall of America in Minneapolis, and we recruited people to come to, I think it was Great Expectations. And I said, when the title, Titanic, comes up on the screen, we'll know if people really want to see this movie or not. And what I was hoping for is that there'd be like this applause when they knew they were getting to see Titanic, because everybody knew Titanic was getting made. And so I'm sitting there, and right off the bat, the title comes up. Nothing, not a sound. And I thought, I'm dead, I'm doomed. And it turns out that what it was is people were just confused. They'd been told it was Great Expectations, so when they saw Titanic, they thought it was a trailer or something. And then the film starts to play. There was a woman sitting behind me, and the whole time she's just narrating the movie, just, reacting to it. And I thought, she gets it. She got every beat. And I thought, wow, this film's really communicating. It's really working. At the end of it, we got the cards, and they were the best cards anybody had ever seen.
After the first preview, we took out probably well over a half an hour from the syncing. It was really about following this couple, these characters that you have so gotten behind, and not letting them go as tangential characters to other action scenes that we might go to.
We got our trailer out there, which ended up being just a slightly shortened version of our Show West piece. The buzz started turning positive.
God almighty.
When I went to the movie theater and I saw the trailer, when Jack and Rose are on the back of the boat and it's going down and the camera comes behind them and Leo yells, "This is it! Oh my God!" The audience is absolutely dead silent. And then they began to cheer. And then we all knew this was going to be something special.
監督のジェームス・キャメロンさん、そして皆様おなじみの主演男優レオナルド・ディカプリオさんです。どうぞ拍手でお迎えください。
We went over to Japan, which was a good 6 weeks before the domestic release of the film. We premiered the film there, and the reaction was overwhelming.
The crowds were going crazy. It was like the Beatles. It was insane. It solidified Leo's rock star status.
I want to say that I'm extremely honored to be here at the film festival here tonight.
But we had to have subtitled, and it was all done very quickly. When we ran the movie for the first time, the first credit that came up was the credit for the translator before Jim's credit. So we had to fix that too.
There was always another pressure ahead of us. We had to worry about the royal premiere in England. We got through that evening, and we said, okay, now we got to worry about the release in the United States.
The domestic premiere was, I think, where we were all really biting our nails. and wondering how Hollywood would respond to this film after all the stuff they'd heard and all the negativity early on. But when that transition shot hit,
Titanic was called the Ship of Dreams.
And we transitioned into 1912 for the first time, and the Titanic in all its glory, the entire audience erupted in applause.
From the moment I heard that music at the premiere, I just thought, oh my gosh, here we go. I just knew this is going to be amazing.
That movie required a larger audience to really kind of share, energetically connect with that experience. When I saw it at the premiere with the Chinese, surrounded by friends and anyone who can get their hands on that hot ticket in the industry, it was the height of any Hollywood fantasy. It reminded me of all the things that inspire anyone to come to Hollywood.
When Titanic ended at the premiere, I thought that just the whole theater was gonna come crashing down. People were just screaming at the top of their lungs. They were so overwhelmed. They were so excited.
That amazing shot when Kate's coming in to board the ship and you're on her hat and she looks up and the whole sky opens up with that ship and the car being loaded. And he captured that so beautifully.
Big boat, huh?
Daddy, it's a ship.
You're right.
I was totally blown away. We didn't know what all that green screen was ultimately going to look like and what it was even for sometimes. You know, as actors, you don't even know how to begin to understand how all of those components come together. It was like, oh my God, it's me and Leo and the ship's moving. It actually moves. Because of course our boat never moved. It was totally stationary. And we only had one side of it, you know, we didn't have both sides. So yeah, it was incredible to see it all put together.
When the back of the ship starts getting vertical, you could feel that. It was an incredible cinematic moment.
It was the first time I'd ever seen the ship really break apart and done accurately, and I always remember the rim of a porthole kind of flying towards the camera, which even in 2D was impressive, blew me away.
I went to the first screening at Paramount and loved the film. And I reviewed it in box office, and I was raving about its ability to tell a grand story on an intimate scale like David Lean, to make you focus on a handful of characters and have a very solid structure, but also the technical aspects were extremely impressive. And his use of CGI was state-of-the-art at the time.
After all the publicity and all the delays and all the reports about its world record budget, turns out to be a glorious Hollywood epic.
When the reviews came in, we were stunned. They were so good. I'd never gotten anything like the kind of reviews that we collectively got for the film because it was such a, obviously, enormous team effort.
The reviewers were very, very positive toward the film. Most people really admired the film. Yet there still were people who made a point of being negative about the film.
We still didn't think we were going to make any money. But at least we knew we had a movie that people liked. So we're starting to breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief. At least we didn't look like complete idiots.
And by December, I actually think people were behind us. We were no longer the Goliath. We were a little bit more the David. We'd started this in December of '94, and we released it in December of '97. It had been a very long, difficult journey.
So people showed up, but we were only #1 that weekend by the tiniest margin. They practically had to do a recount. And it wasn't an enormous amount of money. And so there was nothing at that moment to indicate that Titanic would become the highest grossing film in history at the time. And then the next weekend, it made more money than the previous weekend. And everybody just stopped. There was just this strange sense of, what? That doesn't happen. That never happens. And then the next weekend, it went up again. So that's when we realized it was this phenomenon. And then the phenomenon just didn't stop.
Titanic just kept going up. In fact, our highest grossing single day was February 14th, Valentine's Day, 1998. And that was 57 days after the release of the film. It was a slow realization for all of us that Titanic was actually not only going to be a creative success, but it was also going to be a financial success.
People were saying, this is a film that might even get to $1 billion, something that was unheard of.
The thing that I found most satisfying is that the film played #1 in every country it was released in, which means that it was playing across language barriers, it was playing across societal and cultural barriers, religious barriers, whatever it might be.
Even communist China has given the most expensive, highest-grossing film of all time the official seal of approval.
And it's not like I was trying to do that. I wouldn't even know where to start to do that. But obviously what it meant was that people were connecting to the emotions or some kind of value system that was universal enough. We all want to have a sense of love and belonging. We want somebody to see us, which in a funny way anticipatory of what I was doing with Avatar. And maybe it's because I wrote them both at the same time.
It was a great lesson in that you can make a movie and have a great time, a wonderful time, and the movie can disappear in a weekend. Or you can spend several months and it can be really tough and really hard.
Let's chase.
And then suddenly it turns out to be Titanic. It's the mystery of art. In the hands of someone like James Cameron, you're pretty much guaranteed that something worthwhile will manifest.
We were all pleased with the success of the film, and of course it's a great launching pad for Kate and Leo to become stars, but let's face it, they were on a track to greatness before I cast them in Titanic because they're that good. And I actually think that it might have held them back from the track they wanted to be on, the kinds of films they wanted to make, to be taken very seriously as actors.
Leo, overnight, his life was transformed into something that he never really expected, which was that at that moment in time, he was probably more recognizable than anybody else in the world.
I was just experiencing being in the wave of it, literally. You know, like every day there would be more paparazzi outside my house. Every day there would be more intrigue into who I really was and what my life was like. So a part of how I've had to cope is almost pretending it's not there. And so it was totally overwhelming.
Sorry, a moment.
When the movie first came out, I never foresaw that everyone would want to speak to the historian. And it was just relentless. People wanted to be told that it really was realistic. They wanted to know that it really was the way it happened, that it wasn't all fictionalized.
And the truth was that some cultures responded to it for different reasons. I remember in India, they said that the favorite scene in Titanic was the scene where you see this angling cabinet and all of this beautiful china sliding off and crashing onto the floor. And something about that destruction of luxury and beauty just hit them very hard.
I don't think anyone had the notion it would have resonated with such a wide demographic that would inspire multiple viewings beyond maybe a teenage girl audience who were in love with Leo at the time. So the fact that you had people who never go to movies more than once in theaters seeing that movie, 45-year-old firemen, you know, going back, and not just because their kids want to see it.
It was going across generations. It wasn't just about boy meets girl. It wasn't just about being a great date movie, which of course it was, but really it was this transgenerational sharing kind of experience. And people were really choosing who they were going to re-experience the movie with. I think people made the decisions, I just want to see it on the big screen one more time.
Titanic became something you had to see because you wanted to talk about it. People just wouldn't stop talking about it. It did something. It did something to us. It doesn't happen often. And when it happens, it's very special to a movie.
I've had testimonials told to me by grown men, working men, who are just like, man, that cried in front of my family the first time. I thought about that, how significant that must have been for them. What a weird milestone.
The movie really cut across so many social demographics. It really is a movie that talked about issues that historically were of great concern to viewers around the world at that time, and still are. Gender and class, privilege, nature versus mankind, technology.
There's this myth, I think, that was created by the media that the film's entire success was based on 14-year-old girls going back to see it over and over again because they were in love with Leo. Certainly that was a factor, but I also think they missed a critical point, which is teenage girls loved the movie because it was about them, and they related to Rose.
So when I decided to write the book on it, and I went to see the movie again, and there were two teenage girls sitting behind me, and they were weeping. And I said, how often have you seen this film? And they said, oh, maybe 6 or 7 times. And I said, why do you love this film so much that you keep seeing it? They said the payoff for the movie for them was seeing those photographs at the end and seeing this old woman who had been the young woman and that she had lived a really rich and full life and that she had survived all these troubles and had made something of herself. And that was so inspiring. This movie gave them an opportunity to think about their own future in a way that was transcendent and enabled them to envision an empowered, productive life.
One part of the phenomenon is what James Horner's created with his music and with the Celine Dion song. It has made the movie part of just cultural life. I'll go out places, and there it is in a restaurant. There it is on the radio playing.
I kept being told it had gone gold, and the song had gone platinum, and the album had gone platinum. Then I started to know these terms, but I'd never known them before, and what the Billboard charts meant. That the fact that a movie album could be a #1 album of the year, not just in the movie genre, but a #1 album, was the first time I sort of realized the dent that Titanic had made.
How many times do you think you've sung that song in the time since then?
And on and on. I don't know how many times. But you know what? When I sing it, when it starts, and I see people that can't wait to hear it when I do the tour, when I do the show at night, it's like the first time every time.
I usually don't like the songs at the end of films because it's usually corny. And boy, was I wrong. It's a beautiful song and it really adds something to the film. It sort of is the voice of Gloria Stewart's character.
It took the 3.5-hour experience and put it into like a vitamin. That's 3.5 minutes. It was an incredible reminder of the entire experience played over you. And as a result, you had a video playing. It propelled awareness of the movie exponentially.
It's an anthem. It's become an anthem.
For me to be part of such a huge love story, it was not only a privilege, but an honor.
A lot of people did say, how inspired they were by the film, or by the music, or by the whole emotional experience. People wanted to write music, they wanted to write songs, they wanted to write film scores, they wanted to get into music based on Titanic. And I was very flattered.
The song really had its own life, and hearing it brought those emotions back. If you had seen the film, it brought them back, and that helped with that transition over into pop culture.
I'm going to America! Iceberg, right ahead!
I have a child!
You saw it popping up in pop culture, not just in North America, but around the world.
I'm flying, Jack, I'm flying!
Still today, people are quoting Titanic.
I'm king of the world!
Kind of loud.
Sorry, I just get so excited out here.
I know, king of the world-itis. I've fallen prey to it myself.
People are parodying Titanic.
Well, Smithers, you say you painted all your Navy buddies this way?
Until I was discharged, sir.
Titanic is certainly one that not only found its way into the national and global dialogue.
Let me say it to you, and I'm going to throw it out there. He doesn't want to hear it. And see how you respond. He doesn't want to hear it already. I'm going to tell you, Carl. Jared, I wouldn't be doing my job go ahead. If I didn't share it with him. Do it. Sequel. Kaboom.
But one that's impact continues to echo even today.
I haven't cried like that since Titanic.
Titanic is back. Digitally upgraded with new 3D motion field technology.
I'm the king of the world!
You can feel the action. Titanic. Super 3D. Coming soon.
I was asked to host Saturday Night Live.
Look, my grandmother needs to sleep,
Hey,
okay?
Granny can sleep for the rest of her life after she tells us where that $20 million diamond necklace is.
Oh. How much?
Someone was playing me and someone was playing Gloria, and I like beat her up.
Come on, come and get some!
Jack, pull me out of you!
Yeah.
Flattery that people were riffing on it.
Okay, Rose. Everything's gonna be all right. I was just talking to Jack, and he wants you to tell me where the necklace is so the two of you can be together forever.
But I don't know where it is.
I thought it'd be cool to do a send-up, give Jim a chance to lampoon himself.
Hi, I'm Jim Cameron. Now, what you just saw was the original ending to my film Titanic.
To show that he's not this guy who takes himself so seriously.
So, for Saturday Night Live, I'm James Cameron saying, you're the king of the world. Thanks.
So he did the whole thing, and then at the end, he lights the cigar with a $100 bill. He says, I'm the king of the world. And it was a lot of fun, and it went down really well.
You gotta have fun, you gotta laugh at yourself. And there's this moment where it transitions over into pop culture.
It was the kind of thing that I only remembered happening with movies like Star Wars. I was watching a news program a month or so after it had opened, and somebody had put together a compilation of all of the harbor cruises around Southern California, and all of them were doing Titanic-themed cruises where couples could actually go to just the very front of the bow and kind of do a Jack and Rose moment.
It's a fun ride, what can I tell you? But you can't set out to do that because it just happens.
So you want to go to a real party?
We're here to unveil our nominees for the 70th Annual Academy Awards.
I wasn't surprised that the film got a lot of awards from the industry because I think it's in the grand style of the old Hollywood films that we love, big story, but with an intimate group of people, and Titanic did that.
We'll announce the winners on Oscar night, Monday, March 23rd. We'll see you then.
When we got as many Academy Award nominations as we did, it was at that point that I think I started to realize just how huge it really was.
The Academy members bought into it because they're no different as moviegoers as we are. They fell in love with the story. They fell in love with the cinematography. They fell in love with the makeup. They fell in love with the movie.
Winning 11 Oscars, it was an amazing night because nothing is given, nothing is taken for granted.
To have your film honored in that way, to have your team celebrated in that way, there's absolutely nothing better. But it's terrifying. Mom, Dad, there's no way that I can express to you what I'm feeling right now. My heart is full to bursting, except to say, I'm the king of the world!
I went down like a ton of bricks, but I knew what it meant. Most people did.
She was literally quoting a line from the movie, and the uncynical ones among us sort of appreciated, you know, how lovely that was, how romantic that was.
He was celebrating his good fortune.
I don't know about you, but I'm having a really great time.
And so for him to be there in that moment, I mean, he felt as if he were king of the world.
Look, it's not that I regret it, because it's what I was feeling at the moment, and I said what I was feeling. But it sort of assumes that everybody there is a fan of your movie and knows the line and will celebrate the line. And that's just a step too far. The better path and the smarter path is humility, which is to just be grateful that the movie and the team are being honored, but don't quote your own film. If you ever win an Oscar, don't quote your own movie.
He was the king of the world that night, and it was a great night. I was very proud for Jim. I had seen all the trials and travails that this artist had gone through to bring this vision to the screen, all the sacrifice, all the blood, sweat, and tears. And so it was a great night of triumph.
We're here tonight to celebrate the magic of movies, and I'm grateful every day to get to be a part of that magic and a practitioner in it. I think the film was well received in Hollywood because, frankly, people felt guilty because they had treated us so badly. And this was their way of making it up. Look, there's nothing better than being celebrated by your peers in Hollywood, because when it turns your way like that, it really is heartfelt. People really do like to celebrate movies in our business. And if they can find something that they can agree on that makes them feel good about the movie-making process, then it makes them feel good about themselves, because that's what they do. But God help you if it goes the other way.
Part of the reason that the film community so embraced the extraordinary popular appeal of Titanic, by recognizing it with many Academy Awards and honors throughout the years, is that they were applauding a risk taken and one that scored. That it scored on such a Titanic level, I think made this community realize that if you don't take those risks and you don't operate outside the rules a little bit, you're never going to really get there. And I think they welcomed Jim and the movie as they should have, because he really went for it.
It wasn't really until the night we were fortunate enough to win the Oscar that the pressure that we had been living under for 3+ years was finally off our shoulders.
So this morning I woke up and I couldn't wait for the day to be over. Now I don't want it to stop.
When this ship docks, I'm getting off with you.
This is crazy.
I know. It doesn't make any sense. That's why I trust it.
You'd have to have a heart of stone not to be moved by the love story in Titanic, or just all these people dying. Some people don't want to be put through the ringer like that, and so they sneer at things and they act ironic and superior.
I don't remember there being a Titanic backlash in that heyday of the film, up to and through the Academy Award, but I think there was backlash after that. You know, it was just too big, too successful, won too much, made too much money. And there was this fun denial that happened, especially with guys. Yeah, I went to see it, but you know, it's a chick flick. Meanwhile, they actually went to see it and cried, you know, but now they don't want to admit it.
I remember even mentioning to Jim that you will get things right that people will criticize and claim you got wrong. People can say what they want. I think the movie proved itself.
I remember seeing people walking around with t-shirts that said the ship sank, get over it. So you're bound to have some of that.
I remember thinking at the time that this film is a symbol of our culture. You know, the Titanic is a symbol of all society. And it's a very potent symbol because it's sort of the ultimate technical achievement of 1912, and yet it's fatally flawed and it falls apart.
But this ship can't sink. She's made of iron, sir. I assure you, she can. And she will.
And then years later, all hell broke loose in our country with 9/11, and then we had our economic collapse and all these wars that we're having. And this film said, wait a second, guys, maybe the prosperity and luxury is not good because maybe there's some hidden flaw in this whole thing and we're all doomed to collapse.
Jim Cameron, he is a filmmaker and a storyteller that never ceases to inspire. And I think a lot of that is because there's always a surprise. Titanic is a film that has been taught at the American Film Institute and will continue to be taught as a high bar to reach for, where there is no mistake that the moment the boat hits the iceberg, the next shot is a kiss interrupted between Jack and Rose. That's the moment we've all been waiting for. It's also the moment where Jim brings us back to the romance and says things are going to change now. And that was designed as part of the DNA of the film is really what makes it resonate far beyond just a disaster film.
There's been a large interest that has stayed at a relatively high level since 1997. And Jim dug it out and made it accessible to everybody. And interest is still going strong. Books coming out. People are always trying to figure out how to redo Titanic.
Well, the success of the movie created a lot of new Titanic fans, and it created a lot more historians. And then combine that with the internet, and all of a sudden, it's a very different world from when I first started. And so now suddenly all these people are in contact with each other and sharing a lot of information.
Certainly the film reawakened more of a scientific interest in the recovery.
Here we are again on the deck of Titanic, 2.5 miles down, 3,821 meters.
But also, the movie is about recovery. It's about salvation. It's about, can we take something from our past, something that's submerged? Can we bring it back to the surface in a way that's useful to us? Not simply entertaining, but socially useful. And I think that that's the film's great achievement.
There's certainly lots of fan mail people that were moved by it, and that really showed that they got it, that they understood the film. I got some letters from some great grandchildren or grandnieces of some of the people who were actually on the ship, and those were really nice, that they really felt now that they understood what their relative had gone through.
At the American Film Institute, we've had a series of specials where we've gathered leaders from around the film community to judge the greatest films of all time, the greatest songs of all time, the greatest movie quotes of all time, the most thrilling films of all time, the greatest love stories. And those lists go on, inspiring people to go back and look at the classic films. Titanic has been on almost all of those lists. This is a movie that has moved us clearly emotionally, because it resonates now through our culture in ways that may be even more profound than the actual sinking of the ship itself.
The reason the film worked at all is because it's actually a very pure and simple love story, which people will never tire of that, you know, and the sincerity of that. And I suppose that's why it stood the test of time and always will.
My daughter, who was born during the filming, just finally saw it. She's a 15-year-old teenager. She doesn't like anything. And she's like, Dad, that was really good. It's like, yeah, it's a good movie. She's like, yeah, that's a really good movie.
And I'm approached by people who come up to me and say, I want you to know that I'm studying film because of Titanic, because I saw it when I was 10 years old, and that's why I wanted to make movies. And that's the greatest gift anybody could give us.
I think a lot of people thought that you know, I couldn't go back to filmmaking because I was too scared of doing something that would disappoint after Titanic. But that's not how I'm wired. You know, I always knew that Titanic was a very singular subject, and the next thing I was going to do would be completely different. Whether it was Avatar or Battle Angel or one of the other things I was thinking about would be very different challenges. It would play by its own rules. So I never really thought that way. What really happened was that I took Titanic as permission to do some of the other things in life that I'd always wanted to do, which is science and exploration, which are things that I valued greatly well before I was a filmmaker. I was a diver long before I was a filmmaker. And getting to dive to the Titanic wreck in the cause of making the movie was a really, really powerful experience for me, and I wanted more of that. Pretty cool. I've been looking for years for an opportunity to put Titanic back on the big screen. I always felt that the centenary of the real sinking would be a perfect opportunity. And I never doubted for a second that Titanic was right for 3D. So I thought, well, this could be a way to do it.
We started with the restoration because we never had a true digital master of Titanic.
So we cleaned it up and made it as pristine as possible before we even started the 3D conversion process.
We knew that it was just going to be a frame-by-frame conversion from the ground up, that we were going to be sticklers, we were going to be perfectionists, and we wanted it done right. The men and women who work on these conversions are not button pushers. They've got to be very smart and very talented in terms of being able to judge stereo space. And the vendor that we chose, Stereo D, became very adept at being able to look at the shot and get everything into the ballpark, get everything there. And then we would go in and start tweaking it, and Jim would dial it in, dial it out, a little more depth, a little less depth, based on the way he wanted it to go.
Every frame is looked at as a work of art. In every frame, there is a creative vision to how we're going to add depth to that frame.
Converting a film to 3D is not a magic wand. It's not some black box that just somehow knows psychically how to turn things into 3D when there's no 3D information from that original moment of photography. And it's hundreds of artists working for over a year to outline every subject, every object, every bit of everybody's face, and put it on its correct depth planes. And then clean it all up so that you don't know that any delicate surgery has been done.
My first reaction when Jim said we're going to bring it out in 3D was how wonderful, because a whole new generation of people who have maybe never seen it, but certainly not seen it on a big screen, will have that opportunity.
When the idea came up, let's do a premiere in Hollywood, we said no. Let's go do it in London. Let's go back and do it again.
Here we are for the 100th anniversary in 3D, and it's very surreal.
Very surreal.
I actually never got to walk down a red carpet for Titanic because when they had the premiere in the UK, I was unwell and in hospital and couldn't go. So this is great.
It's also a bit surreal to have been on an expedition ship, you know, I don't know, 24 or 30 hours ago. Steel-toed boots and a hard hat, you know, which I've been living on this expedition ship for 2 months. And then to be here at a glitzy red carpet, it's kind of like 2 separate lives.
Straight from the bottom of the ocean. You know, he was at 37,000 feet down 2 days ago, flew over here at 41,000 feet above the ground, and is here today.
I just think it's incredible that he's actually put it together again and said, you know, they have changed it to 3D, it's going to work, come along and have a look, and I think people will do that.
I'm here now with the woman of the moment. To the screens.
We were a ship of fools, you know, that cast, all gathered together, undertaking this, you know, insurmountable task, and would have meant nothing if there wasn't that bond. It was an extraordinary experience.
It's pretty exciting to be back with the family, and I can't wait to see it in 3D.
We are here tonight to celebrate Titanic, the film, and to remember the tragedy. In celebrating the film, it's a testament to the hundreds of people who worked on the movie. Let's have a big round of applause for our composer, James Horner. And we're thrilled to have with us some of the key members of our cast. Please welcome with me Susie Amos Cameron, Bernard Hill, Francis Fisher, Billy Zane, Bill Paxton, the beautiful Kate Winslet. Let's have a big round of applause for the writer, the director, the producer, the editor, James Cameron.
It's still a bit mysterious to me now, 15 years later, how we managed to create something so beautiful together. But I just want to thank all of you for what you brought to Titanic, and I'm very, very proud of your work in the film. I'm proud of what we did together, and I think it's going to stand for a long time. What an amazing evening. It was great to see the cast again and, you know, a reunion with everybody together. But for me, the most emotional moment was seeing James Horner conducting the orchestra.
I hadn't visited the music since I did the film. So I had to get reacquainted with all of the melodies and all the stuff. But the people that played the music originally are playing it here tonight. So the soloist, the singer, the penny whistle player, the pipes player, they're all here tonight.
It was so beautiful because when we actually recorded the score, James had gone off and recorded those solo artists separately and brought the tracks in. But and I saw the orchestra, but in a way it was bare bones, you know. And I hadn't even met the players. I hadn't even met the soloists until last night. So there was still something for me to learn.
Last night, the Royal Albert Hall premiere was surreal. You never have a chance to go back and redo something, and we did. I think that not only have we come full circle with the film, but I think for us this is closure. This for us is the end of Titanic.
I could just sum it up by saying I'm really proud of the film. I'm really proud of what everybody did. And, you know, I never chose to make films for critical acclaim. It's never been that kind of career for me, and I never really set out to do that. I wanted to be a populist filmmaker. I wanted to make films for audiences, not for critics. You know, it's a fun ride to see the product of all your efforts and all the efforts of so many hundreds of people that worked on the film accepted like that and just beloved by the audience.